You studied law and economics in the early 1990s, shortly after joining Allen's Arthur Robinson as an attorney to kick off your professional career in 1995. 2 years later, you decided to leave the industry to pursue a career in finance, where you went back to school for an MBA and joined McGuire Securities. What inspired this change in direction, and what were some of the difficulties you faced by doing so?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. And back in Australia, which is where I was educated, you actually picked your degree when you were finishing school. So unlike the American system, you chose your degree at the age of 17. Mm-hmm. And what that meant is I chose to specialize in law at a very young age. And so similar to what happens here, you do clerkships or summer internships where you go and work in law firms. And I did those because I was a good girl. And I went and did all of those clerkships. But what I realized when I was working in a law firm is that even though I love the study of law and really love the study of law and reading judgments and writing about different ways of things, I mean, I loved it. The practice of law was very different, incredibly different. And so when I was working in those law firms, I kind of knew that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. When you see what it is that people do all day. And so I went back to school, I finished, but in my mind, I knew that that wasn't something that I wanted to continue. So, but I thought, I want to finish this. I want to, get admitted to the bar, which is how so you went to work for a couple of years and you got admitted as a barrister. And so what happened was I did that, but all the while in my head, knowing that there was something else I wanted to do, right? So what I did was I talked to a lot of people who knew me at the time and said, what do you think it is that I should do? These are the things I really value doing. And then I got advice from a lot of people, to find out where I should go. So what everybody said to me was, you should go into banking. I mean, you should go to one of the banks. And Macquarie Bank was one of the big banks at that time, and ended up moving there. So it was a big shock moving careers, and because I'd worked for about 2.5 years in the law. And when you went to an investment bank, you needed to have a lot of modeling skills. You needed to know your way around a spreadsheet. And I didn't have that. So I had to give myself a crash course in finance. I had done both maths, maths A and B it was then. So I'd done a lot of maths. I'm quite numerate, but learning Excel and learning how to model cash flows and actually my now husband, then boyfriend, used to teach me Excel at night. So I think to answer your question, it was a big change, really big change. And I was very behind when I moved at that moment in time, and I felt behind. But I knew that I didn't want to do what I was doing, right? So I was very excited by banking and by the people that were working there as well. So it was a crash course. I taught myself and threw myself into it. But it was a big deal. And it was a big deal at the time. And I always say to people who I now work with that it was very difficult doing that because other people were promoted above me at the time. And this is when you realize that careers are long, right? So just because you're at the same exact stage, you left school at a particular year, it kind of doesn't matter in the long run, right? But at that moment, it felt like it did matter a lot. So it was a big change. It was a really big change.
And I think it was a great change that you made because you had a very impressive career even following Macquarie, where once you made that move right into the banking industry, to join the firm, you moved across the world to New York. Very bold. And like I said, I don't think you've regretted it, because since you went on to become the co-head and chief operating officer of Morgan Stanley Infrastructure, to now the deputy head of real assets at BlackRock. Phenomenal, very impressive to say the least. How has each transition or move informed your next? And what did you learn about yourself and your career?
Yeah, so when I moved to Macquarie, I was actually at Macquarie for 10 years. So it was Macquarie Bank that took me to New York. And so I was very, very happy there for a very long period of time. It's a very entrepreneurial type organization. I had like 3 or 4 different jobs within the time I was there. So I think that's an interesting takeaway as you're looking to join a company or build a career. You can have many different roles within the same company, right? And you can also ask for different roles within the same company. So it was actually Macquarie that, as I said, took me to New York. My boss said to me one day, "Hey, would you think of moving to America?" And I actually said yes before I even talked to my husband. And I think it's important to look for those type of opportunities where a lot of things are happening. There's a huge amount of growth that's happening. And so I was at Macquarie for 10 years, but doing many different things, and also coming to New York. When I came to New York with Macquarie, it was really a startup. At that time it was very small. But Macquarie wanted to grow offshore because it wanted to diversify away from Australia. And so there was a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth, a lot of personal growth, as well as business growth. And so that was one of the best things I ever did in my career, going offshore. I went offshore for 2 years, and I'm still here 20 years later. So that tells you a little bit about how much I love New York. But so I was there for a very long time, pursued many different opportunities. And I think, what ultimately made me move was, again, looking for growth. And the infrastructure industry was really starting to grow globally. And I started talking to, again, you'll see this theme, right? I started talking to a few people in the industry and really understanding what was happening at some of the big US institutions. And once I started on that journey, ended up moving to Morgan Stanley very, very quickly. So again, using the sort of the crowdsourcing or the wisdom of others, as you look to make these changes, and really talk to as many different people as possible. And so I was there for about 8 years as well, and had a fantastic experience there. And it was when I wanted to grow in the funds management or the asset management industry that had me move to BlackRock, which, as everybody knows, is the largest asset manager in the world. And I've been working there, growing the alternatives business and the real assets business for the last 6 years. So saying yes to growth and change, I think, is a big thematic that I've certainly lived by in my career.
Well, congratulations to your great success throughout your very impressive career. You kind of mentioned the word role throughout some of that answer. And let's move to the present a little bit in the last 12 months. Could you tell us a little bit more about your role at BlackRock? How has your business pivoted in the last year? And has the pandemic slowed or accelerated any trends that you're currently seeing in the market?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about BlackRock. And if you step back, obviously I just mentioned BlackRock's the largest asset manager in the world. And the 3 core elements of BlackRock's growth are iShares on the ETF business, which is the listed kind of beta business. Then you've got alternatives on the other end, which is typically more illiquid, and that's where I sit. And then you've got the Aladdin business, which is a technology business, which connects all of that. And so they're the 3 main drivers of BlackRock's strategy. So real assets sits within alternatives. The alternatives business is about $270 billion at BlackRock, and real assets is about $65 billion. So my world is infrastructure and real estate. So I always say I have the cool things where we own real assets. And we're growing at a huge rate because clients need more, particularly in this lower for longer rate environment. So what happened in the pandemic, and we all lived through this together, was the world changed almost overnight. And back in March, April last year, we all became asset managers. So everybody turned and looked down at their assets and immediately looked to shore up those assets to make sure they were going to be resilient. Nobody knew what was going to happen at that point, right? It's hard to remember back when everything was shutting down, but it happened so quickly and we'd never seen that anywhere around the world, right? Shutdowns on scale. So we spent, that sort of March, April, May, really bolstering our assets. And remember, versus, in the global financial crisis, which was kind of the last crisis that we lived through, capital markets shut down in that crisis. So it was very difficult to raise equity or raise debt. I mean, in the pandemic, actually you could raise assets, right? So it was easier to go out and get that extra capital to make sure you would be resilient. So what we saw is that the pandemic really created winners and losers. So in my world, and you guys could guess, already guess what the answers to these questions are based on how our lifestyle changed, right? The winners were anything to do with what we're doing now online. So fiber, communications, data warehouses, industrial, distribution to get us all of our Amazon boxes as quickly as possible. And then renewables, contracted power, anything that had sort of long-term contracts in place, they were winning, right? Who was losing? Airports, ports for a period, toll roads, anything that was driven by people using it, and also malls. My favorite statement is that malls were mauled, and obviously offices took a bit of a hit as well, right? And so it really created these two very distinct buckets of assets, and it's continuing, right? So you asked, are these themes kind of new themes, or are they just acceleration? So, the answer is that all of these themes were there beforehand, but it really took us forward, probably 10 years, I think. My mother started using Amazon, right? Which has never happened. She always wants to send us $50 in the mail to the kids. And I'm always like, Mom, just get on the internet and order Amazon and send just do that. No, I want to send. And guess what happened in the pandemic? She's using Amazon. So I always use that anecdote because I think it tells you the extent of the acceleration of where we've moved to, right? So I think all of these trends are going to continue. We're all shopping more online. We're doing all of this from different homes. We don't think there's an end to the office. We think people are going to go back to the office, but it's going to be in a little bit more of a hybrid way, right? So I think when we first went into lockdown, a lot of people said, oh, this is great. We can all work from home. We don't need the office anymore, right? I think after a year of this, I think we've all realized that we need much more social interaction, and particularly for company cultures and educational cultures, right? We're missing something by not being together. So where we've ended up is in an interesting place. So we've had those winners and losers. They're morphing a little bit now, right? So things are coming a little bit back to life as vaccines roll out, people traveling again. But the acceleration is real, and we're not going backwards again from here. So it's been a fascinating time for us all to live through, and I think we're going to see a continued acceleration into a lot of these trends in future.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned digitalization, because that was something I just was going to actually bring up and talk about, and I completely agree. The consumer behavior has been already shifting in this direction, and then the pandemic's just really expedited it. What are some transactions that you may have seen over the last few months in the digitalization space? If you don't mind talking about a few, do keep in mind that this is recorded for online use.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that, and I apologize. I've sit in a position here where sun seems to be coming over me, so I know that's not ideal in Zoom land. So apologies for that. So look, this space is a big and evolving space, right? So what we've seen is an explosion, a real explosion of interest, and I'd say in many cases also a bit of a convergence between the real estate and the infrastructure side of things. So, what are we seeing and what are we investing in? We've seen a lot of data center deals, a lot of fiber to the home, and we've actually invested both here in the US and also in Asia. We're also seeing that on the real estate side. The other big area, which is sort of driven by digitization, but a second wave is, as I mentioned, the distribution centers. So all around the world, the assets that we're both buying but also building are those sort of last mile distribution centers. And you're seeing very high quality tenants, the Amazons of the world, and so just really investing heavily into this type of distribution infrastructure. So there's really been just an explosion in that, and it's not just in the US, or it's everywhere around the world.
Many of our audience members are now getting ready to take their first steps into their careers. If there was one piece of advice you wish you had when starting your career back in the mid-1990s, what would that be?
Yeah, so I've got lots of pieces of advice, as you can imagine. But look, I think the piece of advice that I would give to people, and it's probably a bit obvious, right? It's a bit obvious, but the world is driven by people. And looking at the people that you're not only going to be reporting to, but the people who are driving any organization is just so critical. I mean, we obviously make investments off the back of individual management companies. And when I was younger, I don't think I really appreciated that as much. I sort of looked at the company sort of in an abstract way, rather than really looking at the CEOs, the management team, the boss of my division. It was all a bit sort of just brand driven, right? And I think what I've realized over time is that nothing happens by accident. When you walk into a company, when you walk into an asset, when you walk into anything and you notice that it's excellent, right? That is not by accident, right? That is because someone with a maniacal sense for detail, or a team with a maniacal sense for detail and customer service and alpha generation, has made it that way, right? And everything is because of individuals. And so really look at the people, not only that you'll be working for, but look at the people who are at the top, and study them, and study what drives them, and study what they say. And I think that is something that I've only learnt over many years. I really didn't think about it as much when I was starting out in my career. And I think if you study and follow those people, and people that get you excited, and people that you listen to what they're saying and you say, yeah, that's who you should follow to guide your career. And I think if you do that, even if you're not in exactly the right job, if you do that, I think you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be on the right path. So that's my advice, is study the people and follow growth. I mean, follow growth, I think, is kind of tied into that, right? But look for the people who get it, and who inspire you.
Well, when talking about studying people, I think maybe for this one, we could shift focus a little bit to some of your colleagues, current and past. When you look at some of your most accomplished colleagues, is there any common characteristics you notice amongst them?
Yeah, and I think this is, and it's funny, I've never been asked this question before, so this is a good question. And it made me sit back and actually think about, all of the different people I've worked with, and also in my personal life, like who do I admire, and who do I really think is making a difference in the world. And the difference, I think, is energy, right? Like if I think about the people who are making a difference, the people who I admire, it's energy and curiosity, right? It's those people who don't take no for an answer, those people who terrible things happen to, but they don't blame the world, or they don't blame, they really just take it on board and just pivot and keep going, right? But they've always got a very sort of upbeat energy. They always see things in a very positive way, right? That's the sort of the glass half full analogy. And I think it's that energy and that curiosity and that ability that you can change, and you can make change. So I think it's energy. It's that energy. You can feel it when someone walks in a room, right? They've got something different, and the world's not weighing them down, right? And they're gonna make it happen. So That's so energy and curiosity is and you feel it, when you
Yeah.
see that, right? It's palpable. You can, you don't have to ask people. If I said to you, who are the people who have great energy, you know who they are already, right? Like it's you can list them straight away. So that's the people in the long run. I've been fascinated with this book called it's by a guy called James Clear, about atomic habits, and it's about making small changes in your life on a regular basis, and then over time they add up, right? If you keep doing little things. So it's a fascinating book in a fascinating way. So I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't read that book. And you can even go onto his website. I'm in no way affiliated with James Clear, by the way, but like you can go onto the website and he'll also send you a newsletter for free. So, but it's really cool. It's I think people who are just doing a little bit every day.
That's a really great answer and kind of interesting, because a common word I like to use for someone who I seem to believe does very well in their careers is passion, right? And I think energy and passion go very hand in hand. If you have the passion, you're going to have the energy, and you're going to really make a difference and not really give up or be put down when things don't always go your way. So that's really interesting. Great answer. Thank you for that. And to wrap up on my end before we open up to some of our attendees in the audience would be, and this one is for you guys, right? Being very young, getting ready to step into your professional careers. So please listen very carefully, especially if you have interest in BlackRock. While Anne may not be the one who does the interviews or in HR, but hopefully she could give us a little 2 cents on what does BlackRock typically look for when considering a new hire?
Yeah, so I'll focus on the junior levels, obviously, in this answer, because obviously we hire many different people, and it's I think it's pretty consistent, right? That we look for, and we just touched on some of the qualities, right, in our discussions, because everyone that generally gets to interview at BlackRock has fantastic, scholastic credentials, and so you're ultimately looking for people who are passionate, people who are exhibiting emotional ownership. And actually, BlackRock has principles, and they were recently amended and added to. And one of them was, we show emotional ownership, right? So you're looking for people who care and who people see the job as more than just a job, right? We're actually helping people save for retirement. And we're actually really making an improvement around how people understand wealth and want to save. So I will take a very passionate, high energy, passionate person over someone that has high marks, right? Someone who wants to go that extra mile, someone who really is engaged in the real assets business, talking personally, and someone who wants to make a difference. So another one of our principles is, we're building for a better future, right? So I think these are important kind of, they're emotional things, they're qualities that someone can exhibit, right? And so someone who really wants to make a difference. So I always encourage people to be yourself, right? We spend a lot of time at work, right? So it's hard to pretend to be someone else, right? When you're at work. So you want to find the right match for your career, right? And you don't want to be pretending to be someone else every day. So finding that right match, being who you are, and being passionate about but what it is that you want to do, and that's what I say. So it's you want to find that right match. It's a two-way thing as well.
I think now would make the most sense to open up for questions and let some of our audience members ask you a few things. So feel free to raise your virtual hand, and I'll kind of ask in first come first order. So let me just open this up so I could see who's in the top. So Ryan, go ahead.
Hi, Anne. First, I just want to thank you for your time, and I commend you for seeing you thrive in the beautiful sunroom that you have there. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom and insight and just your testament in all these areas. I have a two-part question, and it builds kind of off of what we just talked about in terms of validation and having passion and energy and curiosity. It ties back to when you knew you were really passionate about law and the study of it, but you were working somewhere where you were unsure, like, is this the right direction I'm going in? And I'm exactly the same way with like crowdsourcing, like wisdom from people. I really like the way you put that. But when people were saying like, oh, like finance and like Excel and everything, like, so the first part is, how did you manage like your doubts and knowing like, okay, this is what people think I'm going to be good at and interesting. How do I know this is the right path for me? Like, did you have like, what's your theology, like faith, like that? And so that's the first. And then the second part is, now being at BlackRock for so long, what are the things about BlackRock's culture that really stand out to you as an assurance, like this is the right company for me? Because I've experienced with PGIM from Prudential. So compared to whatever you know about competitors like TD Ameritrade or it's just anybody else, like what is it about BlackRock's culture that really resonates with you? Thank you.
That's great. So no, happy to answer that. And I'll, again, going with the first question. So I'm actually a pretty strong believer in going with your gut. And some people say they don't really know what their gut's saying. I've actually always been someone who kind of knows the answer, or I feel like I know the answer, right, in a pretty strong way. So for me, decisions are, I feel a particular way, like I feel it's the right answer, but then I like to talk to a lot of people and crowdsource. And I especially like to get people who have different viewpoints to me, right? And actually put forward different views. So I deliberately seek people who I know are not going to agree with me, right? And because even if I'm not going to agree with their answer, it might make me think of something that I haven't thought before. So with that change, that one was an easy change for me because I knew that I didn't want to stay doing this. The challenge was working out what I wanted to do, right? And I was offered options within the law firm. They said, oh, you can go and work at a client, go in-house and be an in-house lawyer for a while. And I sort of thought, it's not a bad option, right? Like it would not be the exact same, practice. It would be commercial. It would be more commercial. And so I think I had a number of different options on the table. And to answer your specific question, like how did I think through that? I really thought about what I like doing on a regular basis, right? I didn't like sitting in rooms drafting lots of legal documents. I didn't like, the activities, right? So I often say to people, like, what is it that you like doing? Right. It's a fairly general question. Some people will say, I like modeling out, real estate building cash flows all day. I just want to do modeling. I want to do that. That's what I love doing. Other people will say, what, I'm actually really good at sales, right? I like selling. And I like talking to people, right? Like what gives you energy? Like if you're left alone for a while, what do you like to do, right? And obviously it can't be just like, I like wandering through Central Park, right? Because you actually have to, it's within the confines of your jobs. And so I think when you write that down, and that's what I did. So I wrote down like, here's the bits of my job that I like doing. Here's the bits of my job that I don't like doing. And then you marry those up kind of with job groups, right? And so that was how I did it. And that was how people said, oh, you should look at banking, right? That was when I talked to people enough about what they did every day. Like, what do you do every day in a given day? So like, I don't think it's scientific, but at least it got me closer to people who were the right speed as me. And I think about that a lot. Like, what speed are people? Like, I was in the right wheelhouse with people who kind of thought the same way as me and moved the same speed that I move at. And so it was a good match, right? So I know crowdsourcing, I recommend it. It certainly works for me to hear lots of different opinions. And I think there's no downside, right? Because you might learn something. And so that works for me. So the second bit is BlackRock. And, as you get older and as you work at different companies, the intrinsic culture of a company and the leadership, I talked about this a little bit ago, becomes very important because as you're more senior, you're obviously dealing with that leadership on a more regular basis, but you realize what I talked about before is that drives not only the strategy of the company, but everything about the company, right? The beliefs of those people, how they deal with issues, how they address things head on, how they decide to make the world a better place. And it really imbues the entirety of an organization. So, BlackRock is one of those companies that's founder-led. And so it's been around for about 30 years, but the founders are still there. And their passion, their belief in a better world, their value system is very aligned to my own, right? And you work that out very quickly when you see the letters that Larry publishes. You read about how BlackRock wants to, evolve the world, and that's why I said I encourage people when you're looking at these different organizations. Every organization isn't for every person, right? And so you really have to find, and again, it's more important as you're more senior. It's very important as a senior leader to have that alignment, and to believe in the direction of travel. I think it's important at a junior level as well, but it's definitely more important at a senior level. So, I encourage every candidate at any level to read as much as you can about what those leaders say and how they say it, and things they don't say as well, right? Like, are there big issues out there which should be addressed, and they should be using their leadership to lean into, and they're not addressing, right? There's also what people are choosing not to do is important. So I think know your own values and look for where they align in the world, and you're not going to go wrong.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. Oliver, feel
Welcome.
free.
Hi, Anne. Thank you again for taking the time of your busy day to come speak at this event. Everything's been great and you've been super insightful. So thank you very much. I just have a really quick question as to kind of what you think of kind of this new trend of a decrease of enrollment and interest in students pursuing MBAs nowadays. So my question would be, to what extent do you think an MBA is useful for the longevity of a career at an institution like BlackRock, or just to break into the barriers of a field like commercial real estate?
Yeah, so I am a big advocate, first off, I should say, of higher education. So I'm what was known in Australia as a girly SWAT, meaning I love studying, right? And my kids will even tell you now, like, I love exams. I love, a textbook where this is what I can read and learn. So I love learning. So I'm coming from that angle, so I'm a little bit biased, but, I think education is, one of the great privileges that we can give ourselves and our families. So, I growing up in Australia, an MBA wasn't really a thing, right? Like it wasn't like it is here in the States. So I remember when I first came to the States, I was like, wow, it's kind of an option that a lot of people think about. So, I think the MBAs are really interesting, but only after you've done a number of years of work, right? Because I think going into that setting, which is analyzing complicated business problems, understanding, like a number of layers of different issues, I think you can only really relate to that when you've worked for a period of time, right? So I think once you've worked for a number of years, and you either feel that you want to pivot, even if you don't feel that you want to pivot, like I think it's a nice way to go. The associate who was working for me went back to business school at the end of September last year, and I was fully supportive of that, and I think it's great. And she will email me and say, oh, we're having a session today on X, and I remember when we talked about something like X, and it all starts to make a lot of sense when the case studies are live, right? And you realize that nothing's easy in life, and it's all about making different choices. And so I think you, again, in the right circumstances and with the right experience beforehand, I think that MBA is, I would advise people to do that all day long. I mean, and I just think it can be hugely valuable. And also the connections you make, the people that you meet at those places, and just the different things you learn and the different avenues. I just think you can't put a price on that, right? I just think so. I think it's, I would do that all day long.
Awesome.
And I don't know why people, I mean, again, I think there's a lot changing at the moment, and there's a lot of different views out there. I mean, I think all of these things tend to go in swings and roundabouts, right? But I mean, I think it's probably an awesome time to do it, given all the change going on in the world. And, I would, so I think, yeah, do it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Jonathan, feel free.
Hi, Anne. Thank you again for coming. I just wanted to ask you about ESG at BlackRock and how within real assets, how you're prioritizing sustainability.
Yeah, so the BlackRock Real Assets Group started investing in renewables 10 years ago. So that was what started off our platform. And I say that we did renewables before it was cool to do renewables. So we have close to 10 billion in assets, and we believe very strongly in the need to decarbonize and the need to change the world. So we've been doing this for a very long time. I'd say over the last few years, across all of our businesses, we've increased the focus on ESG, both from when we source an asset, all through the investment process, all through the asset management process and exit. And so, investors in Europe were pushing us. Europe was sort of further ahead back a few years ago. And they were pushing us on reporting metrics, pushing us on a lot more analytics and data. And so I'd say sort of 3-4 years ago, we were already doing more of that, but things have only accelerated, with COVID and so on. So it's embedded. We have a head of sustainability. It's embedded in absolutely everything we do. And we are continuing to double down on it. And this year we have an executive committee, which is created with all the different leadership across real assets. And we're kicking off a number of different projects to go a few levels deeper as well on data and on net zero, working out exactly what that means and implementing it. So I'd say we couldn't be more committed. We couldn't be doing more from the top of the house down either. And ESG is table stakes now, right? It's not like a thing on the side that was nice to have. That's how you play these days, right? And so it's only going to continue to be more and more. Yeah. So it's a part of our way of life, is effectively how we think of it. Now it's just like any other risk factor. We talk about interest rate risks or country risks or finance risk. We talk about ESG risks, right? And I should point out, it's not just the E, right? It's not just the environment. It's not just carbon. We're also looking at diversity and inclusion. We're also looking at the human part of it, the governance part of it, right? Which is coming to the fore a lot more given everything that's been happening the last year. So it's not just the E, it's the S and the G as well.
Definitely, that's great to hear. Quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, but do you have a specific project that you really love to work on within kind of your ESG focus?
Well, we have a lot of different projects that we're working on across the business. Every year we submit to the GRESB system, which is a way of rating all of the different assets. And we're very passionate about improving our ratings every year and getting more and more assets ratings. So so I'd say that's one of my most proud. Obviously, where we've been a leader in this space and we're continuing to grow. But every year when those awards come in and those rankings come in, I'm very proud of the team and proud that we're continuing to push and to lead. And we have a great team that's focused on this. So there's more to do. Again, across the board, I always just like to leave people with the view that there's a lot more to do as we continue to decarbonize and save the planet. So we're very happy with what we're doing, but we always want to do more.
A great answer. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Juliet, feel free.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for taking your time today. I've really enjoyed hearing about your experiences. So for me, as a young student about to embark on my career, have you had a career setback, which in the moment seemed awful, but actually turned out to be an advantage that, now that you've looked back?
Yeah, so I've had a few. I've had a few, and any career is never up like that, right? Careers do go sideways. So I remember, and I've told this story a few times recently. I remember, and I told the Macquarie story, right? So I moved across, and I had the legal background, right? But I didn't have the modeling background. And I remember that there was a promotion to associate. So everyone joins as an analyst, and then you get promoted to associate, and it happens in a pretty standard, I thought, a standard time frame, right? And I didn't get promoted to associate, which is probably the first time ever in my life I felt like I'd failed at something. And I remember being so upset. I remember being just beyond upset, right, that I'd failed. And I remember talking to my manager at the time, and he said, "Oh, I forgot to put you forward," right? And yeah, that is a true story. And obviously, various words were said at that moment. Next year, the following year, so I made it clear that that wasn't something that I was happy with, and something that I had, it was terrible, right? Everybody else had gone up at this point, and I looked like there was something wrong with me. Anyway, so it turned out that the next year I got double jumped, so I got like promoted. There was another, I got double jumped, so it all worked out. But I think so. There's lots of lessons from that story, but including talking to your manager and making sure that your expectations are known. But I think what I've seen, and again, I've been working now for 30 years almost. What I've seen is that careers are so long and are so varied, and it really doesn't make sense. Although people do this because we're human, it doesn't make sense to focus on anyone but yourself, right? Because what happens with the person that, you're looking, well, I'm the same as this one, and I'm not the, and I wonder, when you're in this sort of racing with people, ultimately, as time goes on, it all becomes irrelevant, right? And so I think it's a hard thing to say. It's an easy thing to say, hard thing to do, right? But I do think that having a longer term view really does make the difference, right? And whether you get promoted this year or the next, or blah, 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 as long as you keep your eye on the longer term prize, it works out. So that person that leaves today to go and do that like job that looks really amazing, they might be fired in a year's time, and like things all things all happen in a very interesting way. And so I sort of, and I follow this myself, and I encourage people to do, like, really stay focused on yourself, stay focused on getting skills, and making sure that you're working on yourself all the time. This atomic habits thing that I talked about. What is it that you want to develop? Is it, I really want to get good at modeling, or I really want to, be the best PowerPoint creator that there is, or I want to be the best public speaker that there is. Like, what is it that I want to work on? And keep working on yourself, right? And, in your spare time. And I think that's what happens over time. That's where people really set themselves apart. And, a promotion here, or a pay rise here, or this and that, in the long run, it doesn't matter. Like, no one remembers, I didn't get promoted to associate on that. And people would find that a funny story now when I tell it to my coworkers. They'd be like, really? Like, but I remember that I can remember that feeling, right? And I'll always remember that feeling. And so, yeah, keep your eye on the game, and keep your eye on the skills that you want to develop, and be kind of skill focused, I think, because that's when people jump and make, that's when things happen, when you've been working on yourself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Manuela, feel free.
Hi, Anne. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I'm just interested in knowing if there were any skills or qualities that you developed during your time in law that carried over when you went into banking. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so and I feel very strongly about this one as well. I think law is an excellent degree. So I think the skills you get in terms of reviewing vast amounts of documentation, picking out key points, picking out key moments in judgments that judges decided things, summarizing, being able to argue. I think it's a fantastic degree, right? So, I would not go back and not do a law degree. And I think it was a fantastic degree, and I would tell people to this day to do it as a degree. It gives you a confidence in business. It gives you a confidence in life in terms of reading things, of not being taken advantage of. It's nice to have as a secret skill as well. Like when you're in negotiations, and when it's nice to be a lawyer, because you're not afraid to pick up a document. You're not afraid to cross things out and edit them. I think it gives you some really nice skills that are excellent in life, right? So I do think it's a secret advantage having a law degree. And I sometimes don't even tell people I'm a lawyer, right? Like, people do the introductions and then people say, oh, they find out, oh, you're a lawyer, right? It makes people look at you in a different way. So it's kind of something you can keep in your, in your back pocket. And no, so I like it. And I would tell my kids to do it as well.
Awesome, thank you.
If they wanted to do it, not if they didn't want to do it. But like, I wouldn't force them in any weird way. But like, if
Good
they wanted to
save,
do it,
Anne.
I would recommend it. Yeah, good save. Thank you. Thank you.
And to finish up, unless anyone else will have questions after Kashik, but if not, Kashik, go ahead.
Hi, and I am in my room dealing with COVID, so I'm going to keep my camera off because right now this
That's
is the
okay.
phase
That's also good.
now. So I am a new professor of real estate at the BU Hotel School, and I joined academia now after 20 years in the corporate world. Do you have any advice or feedback for professors and what we can do to make sure we are getting our students ready for the real world? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hope when you said you're dealing with COVID, you're not very sick.
It's the initial stages, so hopefully I'll get through it well.
Oh, so I'm really sorry to hear that, and I hope you get a mild case. And please take care of yourself. So look, I think academia is wonderful, and I really believe that we're able to prepare students and give them a great insight into the way the corporate world works. So I'm loving that you worked in the corporate world for a long time and then went back to academia, because I think that's actually perfect, right? So I'm a fan of case studies. Like, I'm a fan of actually talking about real life scenarios and bringing them to life in a classroom. And I think the benefit, the thing I didn't like so much about studying was, just learning things by rote and just repeating them. I never, like, what's the purpose of that, right? But actually learning concepts and then seeing how they worked in a real life scenario and seeing how people put them to work in the real world, I find really valuable. So case studies are a great way of doing that. But I think any way that you can bring the real world into theory, right? So bring the theory to life. I'm a big fan of, and I think it helps. We all know stories are what makes people remember things. So it's a fantastic way to have people remember concepts as well. So case studies, having people from the real world present. I think that merger of the two of them, obviously depending on what topics you're teaching, but I think for real estate, definitely. I think showing real examples, getting them to analyze real acquisitions, real dispositions. Why not? Let's do the real work, right?
Great, thank you.
Great question, Kashik. Really, I actually like that one a lot. But we're always trying to do better for the students here at Boston University. And so I personally really appreciate that one. I just definitely would like to thank you, Anna, for your time. So.
No, thank you very much for having me, and also for the great questions. I think it's, this is fantastic. This is what it's all about, right? Learning and sharing wisdom, and really great. And thank you for the platform. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anne. It was really great having you here tonight. We all learned a lot, and just thanks again. Thank you.
Welcome. Have a great day.